to be just to be just understood in terms of a theological reflection, or even any sort of philosophical explanation. I gave you a couple of examples from the world of philosophy because that is the same time when even the theology was being developed and philosophy was being developed in the history of this world. You look at the Greek era, people in modern Greece, and you'll see people like Socrates and Plato, Aristotle, all those line of philosophers. They were there at the same time when we had people like Augustine and Thales and all those peoples, the early medieval, before the medieval fathers were there. So all the early church fathers, so maybe around from 150 or 60 AD to 350, 400 AD, during that time. So when we were looking at the deity of Jesus Christ, you may remember a few of the names that we took. People like Athanasius, people like Augustine, people like Anselm. So these were early church fathers who developed theology. When we say theology, not systematic theology. Okay, so we have to understand some of the terms that we use in our study. Number one, whenever we use the word theology, please understand that the meaning that we are referring is understanding about God. Okay, that's it. Whenever we use the term theology, it purely means understanding about God. When we use the term systematic theology, it means the theology which was developed from the ancient times to the modern times, the theology which was categorized into different aspects. That's what we mean when we say systematic theology. Okay. So what is systematic theology? Basically, understanding of God, which is categorized into different aspects. To give you an example, Christology that we are studying is actually a part of systematic theology. Okay. So systematic theology looks like this. You study about the being of Father, the God, Jehovah. We call that study as theology proper. That is the term that we use, theology proper. That is the study of the Father. We study about Son, it's called Christology. We study about the Holy Spirit, it's called pneumatology. Okay. Then we study about the work of salvation, it's called soteriology. Then we study about sin, it's called hamartiology. Okay. So all these logies that you hear is basically systematic theology. Okay. So over the period of time in the history, theologians and scholars categorize the understanding of God into a few headings. So they categorize the study of Holy Spirit into one heading. They categorize the study of Jesus Christ into one heading. So all these understanding that we have today about Christ, don't think that it was developed or it was formulated in the same way 500 years back or probably 1,000 years back, or even the early church. They never had these kind of understanding that we have today in a very systematic manner. So that's why be careful of using these words. When we use these terms, be very clear of what do we actually mean by that. Theology, when we use the word theology, we purely mean study of God, understanding about God. When we use the word systematic theology, it means the study of God in different categories. Okay, so I took the name of few categories. Then there is something called as biblical theology. Okay, now biblical theology is a little different from systematic theology. What is biblical theology? Basically, every book of the Bible has a theology. Okay, which means it has an understanding about God which would be very different to the other book. Okay, for example, if you take minor prophets, okay, and if you study minor prophets, you'll see the understanding about God the Father and Christ in a different way than you see the understanding of God the Father and Christ in the major prophets. Okay, so that is the difference, and that is what we categorize as biblical theology. So Genesis has a theology, Exodus has a theology, all the books of the Bible has a theology in itself. which means what we essentially mean, it means that when we study those books, there is an understanding of God that comes up. Okay, let me give you a small comparison to make this clear. You study Matthew and Luke, okay, just two gospels, and you'll immediately start to see the difference in Christology in these two gospels. What is the difference? There are a lot. Let me mention a couple of them. Number one, when Matthew is writing about Jesus Christ, he is presenting Jesus as the King of the Jews. So everything that we see in Matthew is basically presented in a very royal manner. Okay, so Jesus is coming to Jerusalem, Jesus, returning back. Everything is presented in a very royal manner because Matthew is presenting Jesus as a king. On the other side, when you come to Luke, you'll see immediately the difference in the writing style. Okay, if you go to Luke chapter 1 and verses 1 to 4, you'll immediately find the purpose behind why Luke is writing this gospel. Now, understand that Luke was not one of the disciples who roamed around with Jesus Christ. Okay, he was friends with apostles. He was friends of the disciples. But his gospel is one of the most credible gospels. Why? Because he wrote it in a way, in a manner which was open for criticism and evidence. What is the example? Go to Luke chapter 1 and you'll immediately see how Luke is beginning his gospel. Okay, this is how he writes. Inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile an account of the things accomplished among us. Okay, what does he mean by verse 1? He says that inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile an account of things accomplished among us. He's saying that there are many who have tried to write and record the account and the life of Jesus Christ. Okay, that is what he's saying. Matthew has written it. John has written it. We have Mark who has written it. And obviously there were more writers who have written and recorded the narratives of Jesus' life. Then look at what he's saying next. Verse 2, he says, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and servant of the word. Okay, what does he mean? He says that those accounts were given to us from the eyewitnesses. Now, who were the eyewitnesses? Basically, the disciples who were there with Jesus Christ. Luke is saying, we already have the account of those eyewitnesses with us. Basically, what he meant is we already have what Matthew and Mark has written. Okay. Now, go to verse 3. Then he mentions about his own purpose of writing this. It seemed fitting for me as well, having investigated everything carefully from the beginning, to write it out for you in consecutive order, most excellent Theophilus. Okay, now what is Luke saying? Luke is saying that now I am also going to write the account and the narrative of Jesus's life, but I'm going to do it in a very different manner than what Matthew and Mark has done. What I'm going to do? I am going to investigate and write it. Okay, so there is a very important message there. It means that when Luke writes with evidences. Okay, Luke writes with evidences. That's why if you look at the narration of Luke about any of the events that has happened, or whenever he records the entire events that has happened in and around Jesus Christ. Let me give you just one example. You go to Luke chapter 23. It is only Luke who has mentioned the conversation between the two criminals who were hanged next to Jesus Christ. No other gospels mention the conversation that they had. Okay. Other gospels definitely do mention that there were two more criminals who were hanged next to him. But it was only Luke who mentions what they spoke to each other, or what Jesus, what was Jesus' response to one of the criminals. Okay. So that is the peculiarity of Luke. So what I want to tell you is, when we study biblical theology, biblical theology is basically the understanding of God in every book of the Bible. So Luke would have a theology, Mark would have a theology, Matthew has a theology, every epistle has a theology, and that is what we term as biblical theology. Okay, so understand the difference between these three terms: theology, understanding of God or study of God; systematic theology, categorization of the entire understanding of God in different headings; and then third is biblical theology, which is basically the understanding of God in every book of the Bible. Right? Clear? Any doubts? Anything that you have missed, or you have any confusions about these terms? Right. With that understanding, let us go into now. Now, when we are studying Christology, understand that we are studying systematic theology. We are not studying biblical theology. Okay. We are studying systematic theology. That means everything that we study about Jesus Christ has come from all the books of the Bible. It has not just come from one book of the Bible. So from Genesis to Revelation, everything that has been revealed about Jesus Christ, that is what we are studying right now. So it comes under systematic theology, and we are studying Christology. Now, when we understand, or when we try to study the activity of the pre-incarnate Christ, it is important for us to understand Christ in the panorama of the events that has happened in the biblical history. Okay, number one, we go to the starting point, that is the creation. Okay, now with respect to creation, what was the activity of Jesus Christ? Okay, let us go into some of the Bible passages, and we will look at a few verses. I would request you guys to take out those passages. John chapter 1 verse 3 first. Somebody else, okay, maybe Benji can take John 1:3. Joel can take Colossians 1:16, and if Mohit can help us with Hebrews 1:2.
John 1:3, all things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made.
Right, thank you.
Colossians 1:16. For by him all things were created that are in heaven and visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created through him and for him.
Yeah, okay. Hebrews 1:2.
Hebrews 1:2 hath in these last days spoken unto us by his Son, whom he hath appointed heir of all things, by whom also he made the worlds.
Okay, now immediately when you try to analyze these three verses, you'll see the extent of his involvement in the creation. As a creator, how was he involved with the entire creation? Number one, in John 1:3, what do we read? Did you guys notice what was written in John 1:3? He said, all things came into being through him. That means he is the source of anything that has come into being in this world. That is what his extent of involvement in the creation. Because of him, everything came into existence. We go to Colossians 1:16. The extent that mentioned there is for him and through him, everything has been created. Okay, and when we go to Hebrews 1:2, there it says that the Father has made him heir of everything that has been created. Okay, so his extent is not just that he was involved with the Father, but the extent of his work as a creator is that for him and by him, everything has been created. It is for Jesus Christ, the second person of Trinity, the Son of the living Father. For him and through him, everything has been created. Now, what is the purpose? We again read in Colossians 1:6. For him. It is for him that everything has been created. You read the immediate next verse of it, we see the continuation of that. Colossians 1:17. Can you just read the next verse, Joel? 1:17.
And he is before all things, and in him all the things consist.
Yeah. So he was before everything, and in him everything holds together. That is what it is meant. That means he is the sustainer. He is even the sustainer of what has been created. So he was there in the beginning when everything was created. It was for him that everything has been created, and he is the one who sustains whatever has been created. So his role in the creation is to the extended point that he is not just involved with the Father, but it is for him that everything has been created, and it is for the purpose of his glory and for the purpose of his, for him being the head of everything, everything has been created. So that is his activity as a creator that the Bible mentions in all the New Testament passages. Now, when we read this, it is quite easy for us to understand because we've been listening to this for a very long time in the churches. Okay, whenever we spend time in worship, these are some of the common verse that has, or some common passages which are read, and we basically worship God by glorifying Jesus, saying all these things that it is for him and by him everything has been created. Now, what is more important in terms of understanding the activity of the pre-incarnate Christ is, how is he mentioned in the Old Testament? Now, it is easier for us to understand the New Testament references because we understand that he came as a human being to this world, and we understand all the activities that he was involved with. What is difficult for us to understand is his role or his activity in the Old Testament. So number one, we see two things. Number one is his identity as the angel of Yahweh or the Father. Okay. In the Old Testament, when we look and study the activity of this pre-incarnate Christ before he came to this world and took upon himself the flesh, he was identified as the angel of Yahweh. Okay. Now, let us go to a passage, Genesis 16, 7 to 14. A very familiar passage for us. Anyone can read that. Genesis 16, 7 to 14.
Now the angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, by the spring on the way to Shur, and he said, Hagar, Sarah's maid, where have you come from, and where are you going? She said, I am fleeing from the presence of my mistress Sarai. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit yourself under her hand. Then the angel of the Lord said to her, I will multiply your descendant exceedingly, so that they shall not be counted for multitude. And the angel of the Lord said to her, behold, you are with child, and you shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has heard your afflictions. He shall be a wild man, his hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. Then she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, you are the God who sees. For she said, have I also here seen him who sees me? Therefore the well was called Beer Lahai Roi. Observe it is between Kadesh and Bered.
Okay. Now let me take your attention to come to Exodus chapter 4. Come to Exodus chapter 4. Okay, sorry. Come to Exodus chapter 3 and start reading from verse 1. Okay, now this is what I want you to do. Try to see the difference of the narration in Genesis 16, 7 to 14, and the difference that is there in Exodus chapter 3. Okay. I hope that you remember what Joel read in Genesis 16. Now, with keeping that in mind, read Exodus chapter 3. Yeah, starting from verse 1. Yeah, you can read that.
Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountains of God, even to Horeb. And the angels of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see the great sight, why the bush is not burned. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses, and he said, Here am I.
That's it. That's it. Okay. Now tell me, in both the places, the same usage is there, angel of the Lord, right? What do you see the difference in both these passages? Where was Christ and where was Father the God? Who is speaking in Genesis and who is speaking in Exodus? What do you think? Just by a preliminary reading, without going into any of the study as in such, just by a simple reading, what do you think? Who is speaking there in Genesis 16 and who is speaking in Exodus chapter 3?
As per my thinking, in Genesis, it's Jesus Christ, and in Exodus, it's God the Father.
How did you get to know that? I mean, what was the pointers that you think that made you think in that way?
Because God, you cannot see it, right? So the what you got, the glory of God is never means never down to humanity.
Voice is breaking.
Hello.
Yeah. We just lost you. Oh, okay. I think it's my internet connection which is not stable.
What I'm saying is the glory of the God, the face, the glory of God was never it was never lowered. The glory of Lord Jesus Christ was lowered.
Okay, good reasoning. Anyone else? Anyone else? What do you think? Who was there in Genesis 16 and who is here in Exodus chapter 3?
But one more question in Genesis 16, why can't be only it be an angel, not Lord Jesus Christ itself?
Yeah, we'll come to that. Yeah. Anything apart from what Justin gave as a reasoning? Anyone else has any other reasons to conclude? No reasons. Anything. I mean, don't think that you'd be wrong. That is fine, absolutely fine. We are just discussing here to get a better understanding of the references to Christ in Old Testament. What do you think? Any thoughts that comes to your mind? Okay, let me come to the details of it. Now, in the Old Testament, you'd find many such occasions where the narration would start with the sentence, and the angel of the Lord appeared. Okay, that would be the starting point of narration, and that kind of a narration would be there in many passages. Now, when you study the entire Old Testament, you would see that some of those narrations is where Jehovah himself is speaking, and in some of the narrations, it is actually Jesus Christ speaking. Now, in both these appearances, they have a term which we call in theological language. One is called Christophany, and the second is called theophany. Okay, wherever Jehovah, Yahweh appeared and spoke to the people, those appearances are called theophany, and wherever Jesus Christ appeared and spoke to the people, it's called Christophany. Okay, now this has been a great debate in the biblical world, that how would we distinguish between theophany and Christophany? How can we understand actually that this is Jesus appearing and this is Jehovah appearing and speaking? Okay, so there is no conclusive study yet. There would be a lot of pointers that would be mixing in between. But just to give you a brief understanding rather than going much of the details of it. Number one, as Justin mentioned, you would whenever God is appearing, you would immediately see in the narrations that there is a glorification that is happening there. Okay. A glory is, even if the word is not explicitly mentioned, glory of God, you would see that the writer or the author has narrated the entire incident in a very reverential way, where he would give a lot of honor, glory to the entire appearance or whatever has been said. Now, the second mark that you would see that, I don't know which all Bible translations you guys are reading, but you come to Exodus chapter 3, verse 4. If anyone has KJV, can you read KJV in that? 3, 4. Exodus 3 and 4.
And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush.
There are two words that are used. Did you notice that?
Lord and God. Yeah.
The Lord.
Lord
Yeah.
saw that he was turned, and God called unto him.
Saying Lord, and then immediately he moved to God. Okay. Now, this is marker where we see theophany. Okay. Wherever the word God is used, in Hebrew, it is actually Elohim or Jehovah that has been used. Okay. So you would immediately understand that it is theophany which is happening here. It is the appearance of God the Father. The author's narration changes. Okay. You go to Genesis chapter 16, you don't see any narration changing there. It is simply saying the Lord said, or the angel of the Lord said, which essentially gives us a marker that it is basically Christophany or Jesus Christ appearing and speaking about all these things. The second pointer about understanding Christophany is there is a differentiation that has happened. Okay. Go to Zechariah chapter 1, verse 12 and 13. Zechariah 1 and verse 12 and 13.
Then the angel of the Lord answered and said, O Lord of hosts, how long wilt thou not have mercy on Jerusalem and on the cities of Judah, against which thou hast had indignation these 70 years? And the Lord answered the angel that talked with me with good words and comfortable words.
Yeah. What do you see as a marker of Christophany here? What is the cue in that passage that it is actually Christophany, or it is the angel of the Lord? There is Jesus Christ. What do you think is the cue there?
Thus saith the Lord of hosts.
Yeah. And anything else?
And it is mentioned that, and the Lord answered the angel.
Yes, the Lord answered the angel. That means Jesus Christ is basically talking to the Father there, and the Father is responding there. Okay, so that's where the whole understanding of Christophany comes there. That it is Lord Jesus Christ asking and the Father responding to it. Okay, we see a similar usage in Psalm also. When David is writing. Okay, can we quickly read? We'll go to Psalm 110 and verse 1.
The Lord said unto my Lord, sit thou at my right hand until I make thine enemies thy footstool.
Yeah. Did you get it? The Lord said to my Lord. Okay. Yeah. So the two mentions of the Lord that is there. Okay. That is for, one is for Jesus Christ and one is for Father, the God. Now, anyone who argues, please listen to this carefully, anyone who argues about monotheism being understood in terms of one God as one person, they are mistaken when it comes to passages like these. Okay. Even a person like David understood that when I call Elohim, okay, for your understanding, the word Elohim, when you go to Hebrew text, Elohim is a plural word. It's not a singular word. Okay, the word Elohim is actually plural, which gives us the cue that it is talking about one God, but in multiple persons. One God, multiple persons. And that's why David, with the same understanding, says, the Lord says to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. God the Father speaking about Jesus Christ. Right? So, making sense, getting the cues where we find and understand that, what is the difference between Christophany and theophany? How do we actually understand when Yahweh has appeared and when Jesus Christ has appeared? Please understand that the words would be very similar. It would be Lord, angel of the Lord. Those would be the things that has been words that would be used. But immediately when you look carefully at the narration, you'll see the difference. Wherever Jesus Christ is mentioned, there would be a difference in the narration. Wherever God is mentioned or the first person of Trinity is mentioned, the narration would be a little different. Now, another activity as an angel of Yahweh for Jesus Christ was he accompanied Israel when they left Egypt. Okay, so whenever we read portions like Exodus 14:19, 23:20, 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 4, we see that in all these places, Jesus Christ is present with the Israelites. That is what it is mentioned in those passages. Now, these appearances of angel ceased after the incarnation. Okay, now that is the most interesting part. We don't see the appearance of Jesus Christ anywhere mentioned in the New Testament as the angel of the Lord appeared as used for Jesus Christ. Why? Because after Jesus Christ took upon himself the flesh, he died, resurrected, and ascended to the heavens. He continues. Please understand that many people have this wrong notion that he ceased to exist as a human after his resurrection. No. Okay, he has not ceased to exist as a human. The only difference that has happened is he got a glorified body. Okay, when we read about or when we study about the resurrection and the ascension, we'll go into that portion of understanding the humanity of Christ post-resurrection. But please understand this, that the appearance of Jesus Christ as an angel of God ceased after his incarnation. It was only till the time when he was pre-incarnate Christ sitting at the right side of Father. Right? Clear? So what was his activity? He was presented as a self-manifestation of Yahweh. He was distinguished from Yahweh, accompanied Israel when they left Egypt. His appearance ceased as an angel after incarnation. Okay, what was his ministry as the angel of Yahweh? His ministry was, number one, messenger to various people, right? We saw him speaking to Sarai, okay, and he's giving a message of God to her. He guided and protected Israel. We see throughout the Israel's history that the angel of Lord protected them, guided them in their entire journey. He was the instrument of judgment on Israel. 1 Corinthians chapter 21, we see that. He was the agent of refreshment to Elijah. Okay, he appeared to Elijah and he became a refreshment. Now, look at the third point. Okay, there's another possibility of misunderstanding. Many times we think that it is Yahweh who judges and he's the one who is going to judge. No, it is Lord Jesus Christ who is going to judge the world. Okay, and that's why when we study about the offices of Christ, we'll see him as a prophet, king, and judge. Okay, many times when we use that word, he judged the world, we immediately think of Father Yahweh, he being judging the world. Okay, but that was not just limited to Father. Father has already judged the world, and as a result of that, Jesus Christ had to come to this world and he sacrificed himself, the atoning death, fulfill the judgment of Father. That is done. Now, who is going to judge the world? It is Jesus who is going to judge the world. So when we see the offices of Jesus Christ, we'll see those pointers. Okay, so that was the activity of pre-incarnate Christ. So when we understand what was Jesus doing before he came into this world and took upon himself the human body, these were his ministries. He was serving as a messenger to various people. He guided and protected Israel. He was instrument of judgment on Israel. He was the agent of refreshment to Elijah. Right, clear? Any questions or anything that comes to your mind? Any doubts?
One question, did Jesus appear in the Old Testament? Means, did Jesus manifested in the Old Testament?
Okay, now when we use the word Jesus, the problem is exactly there. The name Jesus was given to him for his incarnation. Okay, when he took upon himself the body, the flesh, anyone who is born to this world has to be identified with a name. Okay, and that's why that name was given to him. That's what we see in the prophecies. He was given the name Emmanuel, God with us. Okay, it was a name given to him for his incarnated being. Okay, when Jesus coming to this world, taking upon himself the flesh, that's when he got the name. Before that, any appearance that we see of Jesus Christ, everywhere it's angel of the Lord, angel of the Lord, angel of the Lord. That's all. It never says, the Old Testament never mentions him as Jesus, because Jesus is a name that was given for him. Jesus is basically the Greek of Hebrew, that is Emmanuel. Okay, it is translated as Jesus. Emmanuel was the name given to him for the incarnate Christ. The pre-incarnate Christ doesn't have a name. Okay, another probably understanding that that is essential for us to understand is that all these names that has been even attributed to God, Jehovah, okay, names like Jehovah, Yahweh, it's a big study in itself. You would have heard some of those studies about the names of God the Father. Okay, please understand that these names were given, or it is mentioned by the authors of the Bible with a particular attribution. Okay, like for example, Jehovah Rapha, okay, the healer. So that name basically attributes, basically explains one of the attributes of God. Okay, any name that you call God the Father, it basically is there to explain his character for mankind. God himself does not have a name. It is a name given by the authors of the Bible, by the writers inspired by the Spirit of God, just for the mankind to understand what kind of a God he is. God is spirit. He does not need a name. Now, why do we call him Father? Why not as a mother? Or why is God mentioned in a masculine gender throughout the Old Testament? Why not as a feminine gender? God is spirit, right? He doesn't have a gender. But then why God is addressed as a masculine gender? He. Again, when God appeared to his people, he came as a father figure. Okay, he came as a father figure, as a protector, as a savior, someone who can provide for his people. Okay, and that's why he's addressed as the Father, not because he has a gender. Okay, and whenever we read any of the pronouns in the Bible, he, please understand that it is not something that represents his gender, but it is something that represents his identity. God came to mankind as a loving, providing father to whom the mankind can go and find the shelter. Okay, why did Jesus Christ come to this world as a man? Why not as a woman? Again, the same explanation. Okay, because the purpose for which Jesus came to this world, the fitting body was of that of a man. Okay, if you go and study the there's a beautiful documentary. I'm forgetting the name of that documentary. I would actually suggest you guys that if you get a chance to see it, please do watch it, because that documentary actually explains the anatomy of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Beautiful documentary. It explains how exactly Jesus died. Okay, now when you see that documentary, you will immediately start to have a very different perspective towards the death of Jesus Christ. Okay, whenever we read the Gospels and the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, we take it in a very simple manner. Say, okay, did you ever cry when you read the Gospels about his death? No, right? But you would have cried when you saw Passion of Christ, right? You know why? Because of the picturization that is there, right? When you read that sacrificial death on the cross, it is hard for our minds to get a picture of what would have happened to Jesus Christ, because it is easier for us to say that, oh, he was crucified, his blood and water came out of his body and he died like that. No. There is a beautiful documentary which explains the anatomy of his death, that what happened at every stage of his crucifixion. When the nails were pierced on his hand, what was the impact of that nail on his body? Okay, so his hands, both of his hands were pierced with nails on that wood, which made it, because of that, the impact was direct on his heart. Okay, and that anatomy explains that after a while, 6 hours on that cross, basically the heart was broken. Actually, it was broken. Okay, because of the bodily weight that was there. He was just hung there on those 2 nails. That's it. No support at all. And how was his leg? His leg was not there with a support. Rather, his leg was like this, which means even his leg was just there on 1 nail. Okay, that was the only support. That means his entire body weight was basically balanced on these 3 nails. And in these 6 hours of hanging on that cross, basically his heart actually tore out, because his body weight did not handle the entire weight of his hand and the shoulders and everything. And it shows the entire impact of what has happened in each and every part of his body. When he was pierced on his side, what exactly happened? Okay, the beautiful anatomy of what happens at the cross, especially with Jesus, what all happened. Okay, and that's another reason why you would remember that the soldiers went and they checked if the criminals have died or not. And one of the criminal was still alive, and they broke his legs. You know why? So that when they broke his leg, the entire body weight will come upon his shoulders and his heart will burst out and he will die. But when they went to Jesus, they saw that he's already dead, and that's why his leg was not broken. And it was also definitely there to fulfill the prophecy that not even one of the bones of the Son of God would be broken. So multiple reasons. So that's why when we picturize all these things in the New Testament, and when we see the activity of Christ in the Old Testament, it actually takes us closer to the person of Jesus Christ, his activities as a pre-incarnate Christ and his activity as a incarnate Christ, whatever he has done for us. Right. So, okay, let me quickly finish this because we don't have much here and it is quite simple for us to understand. Incarnation of Christ, I'm not going into the depths of it because we all have a quite clear understanding of what is incarnation. Let me give you some pointers here and I'll stop. The word incarnation itself does not appear in the scriptures. Number two, its components, that is in flesh, that appears in the Greek language when John mentions it throughout in multiple chapters. What does it mean? The eternal second person of Trinity took on himself humanity. He came in the likeness of sinful flesh. Romans 8, chapter 3. Okay, the means of incarnation, again, something which is quite clear to us. He came through virgin birth. There is a huge controversy on virgin birth, which we can discuss and talk later on. But just to understand, how do we know that Jesus came to this world? What are the evidences? It was one, Mary's response. Mary as a virgin, when the angel of the Lord appeared and he spoke about all these things, she was perplexed because she was not yet married. So that is one of the evidences. Then Luke mentions that the angel declared that the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Now, what is the important point? The important point is that it emphasizes more on the divine generation than the method itself. Okay, so whenever you're defending the virgin birth of Jesus Christ, please understand that the method is not important, but it is divine, it is miraculous. That is what is important here. Okay, that his birth was divine. Matthew safeguarded the virgin birth in the genealogy. When he mentioned about Joseph, then immediately he mentioned about Mary, mother of Jesus Christ. So he basically was safeguarding Matthew. Now you'll also notice that in the four gospels, you won't see much of the discussion about virgin birth. It is only a couple of evangelists who write it. Apart from that, there was no controversy. You know why? It is because in the first 100 years of Jesus' birth, death, and ascension, there was actually no controversy about virgin birth. People had a very clear understanding what it is meant by virgin birth. It is in the 2nd century onwards where the entire controversy and how can a virgin give birth to a child, that controversy came. And later on in the modern world, that is after 16th and 17th century, it was Muslims, okay, it was Islam which took upon that topic and made it as a huge controversy, because obviously they had nothing else to, prove that Jesus is not God. Okay, genealogies, that is another evidence that Jesus Christ came to this world, because every man who is born into this world has a genealogy. So both the authors of the Gospels, Matthew and Luke, both of them trace Jesus's genealogy. Matthew has 41 selected names in his genealogy. Luke has 77. Matthew traces Jesus back to Abraham. Luke goes back to Adam. Matthew's list is commonly regarded as Joseph's lineage and Luke's as Mary's lineage. So when you read that entire genealogy, you'll immediately see the difference in the genealogical listing of both Matthew and Luke. And I said earlier that both of them were writing to two different audiences. Okay, Matthew was writing purely to the Jews, and that's why he limited his genealogy to 41 selected names and to Abraham. He didn't think that it is necessary for him to mention Adam there, because for Jews, Abraham was the main person. Okay, even today we'll go for Jews, Abraham is the main person there. But for Luke, it was a complete different story. For Luke, it was an investigation. Where did Jesus come from? And that's why he takes his genealogy even back to Adam. Okay, to the curse that is given. What was the curse given? Or what was the repercussions of the sins that Adam and Eve committed in the Garden of Eden? He said that the serpent will strike your feet and the seed of the woman will strike back the serpent, or it will cut off its head. Okay, so now that seed of the woman is basically the first reference to Messiah. Okay, that is the first reference to the coming Messiah in the Old Testament, the seed of the woman. Right, so those are some things which are quite clear to us, so we will not go into much details of it. Okay, what are the purposes of incarnation of Jesus Christ? Number one, to reveal God to us. I mentioned in during the class of Trinity that Trinity is so important to us because it was absolutely not possible for man to know this God unless Jesus Christ would have come to this world. Okay, not possible at all. Why? Because in the Old Testament, the appearances of God were in a very different way. When Jesus Christ came to this world, the man's understanding of God completely changed. Someone who is immanent and reverent in the same time. Who is a friend to me as well as who is a God to me. Okay, and now that understanding is only in the Christian worldview. Please understand that as well. It is one of the uniqueness of the Christian worldview that the same God whom we worship abides in us as well as speaks to us in a way that is understandable to us. He's a friend to me. He comes to me as a lover, and also he is a God to whom I offer my worship. This same understanding of theos or God is not there in any other religion. Number two, to provide an example for our lives, 2 Peter 2:21 and 1 John 2:6 speaks about that, because Jesus went through so many sufferings and trials. Even when we live in this world, we can also face those trials and resist the sin. To provide an effective sacrifice for sins, quite clear to us, to be able to fulfill the Davidic covenant. God made a covenant with David that I will bring forth a Messiah or a king from your lineage, and God fulfilled that covenant. To destroy the works of devil, another clear understanding for us. To be able to be a sympathetic high priest for us, he can be a sympathetic high priest to us because he himself suffered in that body. Finally, to be able to be a qualified judge, that we will look at more closely, even both the high priest and the judge, when we look at the office of Jesus Christ. Right, okay, we'll stop here. Any questions that comes to your mind, anything you want to discuss, or else we'll stop here, and later on, maybe next week, we can on the offices of Christ.
One question is, did God manifested before the incarnation in the Old Testament? Means did he lower himself before the incarnation?
No. He didn't lower himself. If you're asking about lowering as a position, positionally, if he lowered himself, no, he did not. He always appeared. So whenever you see the appearances of God, whether to Moses or to the Israelites or to the crowd or to any of the prophets, God always appeared as either as God himself, Yahweh himself, or as the angel of Lord. In both the cases, for mankind, he was a God or the higher power. Man always had an understanding about God as a Yahweh or Elohim coming to them and speaking. And that's why you see immediately in every appearances to individual man or even to the group of people, there was a reverence aspect which was there, because people actually understood that it is God who is coming down. But if you ask about the positional aspect of Jesus Christ lowering himself, no, that did not happen till incarnation. So the lowering part was actually taking upon himself the body, nothing else. Okay, so when Jesus,
as you are saying that angel of the Lord, it comes to Abraham, and it means they had a what you call dinner or lunch or something. Sorry. 1 minute. Okay. So my question is, okay, did if God has not lowered himself, then did Abraham see God there?
see, the point here is that when God appeared to mankind in the Old Testament, okay, God appeared to man in different ways. Sometimes he took upon himself a glorified form there. For example, when Moses was talking to God the Father on that mountain, he appeared in so much of glory that that bush actually was in fire, and there was a big light that Moses was not able to see that light. Okay, so that's how God appeared to him. In another incidences where God appeared to man, he appeared as some angel or some man. Now, the problem here is that the description of the angel is not mentioned in the Bible. So when it says that an angel visited Abraham, we don't know if that angel was looking like a man or not, or how did the mankind that time, or Abraham and others, how did they realize that it is the angel? Probably because of the conversation they understood, or was it like an imagination? Like if we today imagine an angel, now we would probably imagine like a white robe, and some people would even imagine some wings and all. So those descriptions, as in how did that angel appear to them? Okay, that description obviously is not given in the Bible. So we really don't know how people looked at them and how they got that understanding. But immediately when God started speaking, it was quite clear that it was God and it was the angel of the Lord. Okay, so I personally believe that there was something about that appearance which made people immediately understand that it is the angel of God. It might not be like a normal human being. Okay, so that's what I understand.
One more question. Exodus 33:11. And the Lord spoke unto Moses face to face.
Yeah.
So did he at that time did he lower himself?
No. So what is happening is, earlier when God the Father spoke to Moses, Moses made a request. If you remember, Moses made a request that, Lord, I want to see you. Okay. You remember what was God's response? God's response was, no, you can't see me, because the moment you see me, you will die. But what I can do is I can show you my back. That is what God said. I can show you my back. So, and it is written that Lord appeared to him. Now, please understand that all these sentences are in a very illustrative way. Okay. When God says that I can show you my back, God was not literally saying that, I have a body, I have a back, let me show it to you. No, that was not what God meant. God meant that I will lower down my glory, in the sense that you can at least have a look unto me and have a conversation. Now in chapter 33, when it says face to face, it meant that that kind of a glory was not present, which was there on the Mount Sinai. Okay, that burning bush was not there. That kind of a big aura was not there, but rather Moses, in a very calm manner, was able to speak to Father or speak to God. And that's why it is said face to face. Not that he came as a man and then he had a face and they spoke face to face. No, not like that. But he could speak to Father without any of that great aura or anything dramatic happening there. That is what is meant in chapter 33, face to face. Even in other appearances, you look at when God appeared to Jacob, he was wrestling with Jacob, right? God was wrestling with him. Now, in that condition, he definitely took upon himself a bodily form. But Jacob immediately understood that it is not a normal man. Why? So I believe that either those appearances or the power. Okay. Now, even if it was God in his complete form wrestling with Jacob, Jacob could not even stand one moment, right? But it was the plan of God, where God wanted Jacob to understand few things. God did that. You see another experience. The donkey of Balaam spoke, right? Now, we see why it was needed for donkey to speak. Can donkey actually speak? No, donkey cannot speak. We see in prophecies that the trees spoke. Okay, can the trees speak? No. See, these are all allegorical way of God presenting himself to mankind in different ways. Sometimes maybe as a man, sometimes maybe just as a power or a light, sometimes through some animals. Whenever God wanted to fulfill his purposes in any of the incidents in the entire narration of the stories, God appeared to man in different forms. But even then, it is not written that, or we cannot conclude that God took the body. No, he didn't take a body as in such that we see in the incarnation part. Okay. He just appeared to them in that form. See, God can take any form, right? He being the spirit, he being the creator, he can take any form at any time. So it was God taking different forms. He did not lower himself to take upon himself the body. So that's a different thing. And also in the incarnation part, it was not that Jesus suddenly took a body. No, he was born, right? You see him manifesting from the seed of a woman, coming to this world as a human being taking a body. So that was the entire process. But in the Old Testament, we don't see that processes any as such. It was just God appearing that time to fulfill his purpose in some or other way, and then gone. Okay, so that's the kind of explanation I think we can understand from the appearances of God. Right. Any other doubts or anything that comes to your mind? Okay, just a pointer here. Please don't take Christophany and theophany lightly, that it is very easy to understand. No, it is difficult. The more you read the narrations, the more you read the passages, you will see that that demarcation between description of Christ and the demarcation between description of Yahweh gets very confusing as well as blurry. Sometimes you would think that, okay, it might be Jesus Christ. Then immediately later on in some other passage, the reference would be given that, no, it was actually God himself who was speaking. That's why it is important that we should never conclude biblical pointers, or we should never jump into conclusion with what we understand immediately from the passage. Sometimes later on in the chapters it is mentioned, some reference would be given to this narration, and then we conclude, okay, it was actually Jesus Christ there, right? And that happens many times. The best example is when you read Psalm. When you read Psalm, many times you don't understand about whom the author is speaking. Is he speaking about God? Is he speaking about Jesus Christ? Is he speaking about somebody else? When we read the entire Psalm and probably try to see the background of what is the author's background there, we many times come into that conclusion, okay, it is actually speaking about Jesus Christ. So yeah, so whole lot of issues that you'll see in theophany and Christophany, and it's still a very debated area in theology. Many people have many debates, and it still goes on. Anything else? How is Benji's camera moving? You're actually moving it, or
It's like zooming in and it's zooming out.
It's centering itself actually.
It's sensing our motion and adjusting. The frame is adjusting accordingly, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know how it's doing that.
Okay. Right. Okay. So if nothing else is there, we can just conclude. Okay. A couple of more sessions and we'll be done. What now left is the office of will study about the priest, the king, the prophet. Four officers will study. We'll see the impeccability of Christ and the atonement of Christ. We'll see, and probably in that session itself, we can see the resurrection and the ascension of Jesus Christ. So those are topics which is left for us in the topic of Christology, and maybe one session we can just look at some prophecies that is related to the resurrection and the work of Christ in today's world and all those things. Yeah. So maybe next 3 or 4 sessions, we'll just finish off Christology. Right. And, one more thing I was suggesting that rather than spending like 6:30 to 6:45 or 50 for swimming, and I believe you guys already have a youth meeting, right?